So I was awakened in the wee hours of the morning by a phone call. And I remember I reached for my phone, and the caller ID indicated a jail or correctional facility or something like that. And so my initial thought is this is probably a wrong number, but I answered it anyway. And it just so happened to be my ex, whose name was spoken after the "you have a collect call from" message. And so I'm getting myself together, and I'm listening as he's being connected, and he's telling me he's in jail. The longest short of the story is that his mistress is the reason he's in jail. So I'm trying to understand, how did it come to this, right? Now, this is, of course, after he's moved out. We're living separately, but it's still pretty new. So me getting this call while he's in jail, I take no pleasure in it because I already have a lot on my plate. And I really didn't want to deal with his foolishness. I didn't want to deal with it. So I was like, okay, he's locked up. He's explaining what happened. It sounds like really crazy, but nevertheless, I'm like, okay, hopefully he can get some kind of resolve quickly with this, and he can go on, be out and free and deal with his stuff. Of course, that's not what happened. And what I've learned in hindsight was any tinge of rose color still on my glasses needed to be stripped off. Because even after he was outed, I still didn't have the full context of what had happened in my marriage. And what I learned as a result of his being incarcerated was, this is how I learned of the timeline of his betrayal. This is how I learned that he started cheating the first year of our marriage. Him being locked up also revealed the mental state of his mistress. And it also revealed that I was the last to know about all of these events that were going on behind my back. I would say the good that came out of him being locked up was I was able to have a sit down and talk with his children. It wasn't planned, it was very much spontaneous, but it happened as a result of him being locked up. And that was the good that came out of it. We were able to clear the air. We were able to get a better understanding. And what I've learned is that he even used his children in his manipulation. And they had a certain perception of me based on what their father was saying behind my back. And I felt really bad for them because they had to witness, in their words, a serial cheater pretend to be this good husband in my face while stabbing me in my back. And they had to witness that and just basically remain quiet about it. And so I know that mentally affected them. So, but like I said, we were able to clear the air, and that's the good that came from this unfortunate situation. Now, what was interesting was how his demeanor flipped once he was locked up. And I would say this is why you don't, when a man is desperate, which is what I would call my ex at this moment in his life, when he's behind bars and there's nothing he can do about it. And he ended up being locked up a lot longer than he would normally have been for the type of charges he had. But like I said, I believe everything was done the way it had to be done, because it was the only way the book was going to be opened and the real story was going to be told. So his demeanor was different towards me. He was trying to act lovingly towards me, which was weird, right? Even before I had all these details, it was weird to hear him speaking like that on the phone with me. But I understood that he was in a place of insecurity and desperation because he's locked up. And so I made it my business to not kick him while he was down. I definitely had the opportunity to do him dirty while he was locked up, and I didn't, because I was looking into my personal future, right? I understood the seeds I sown would reap a harvest into my future, and I didn't want to sow bad seeds. Even though most people would have probably said you're well within your rights based on what he's done. I still show him grace while he was locked up. I did what I could to help him. But like I said, and even though I didn't want him to be locked up like that, I realized that it was necessary. It had to happen because he wasn't going to change. He wasn't going to do anything differently had this experience not happened. Do I think him being locked up changed him? I won't say that, but I believe he definitely got humbled in this experience. Because if you look at it just from a bird's eye view, he got locked up for adultery, right? If he had never engaged in this affair with this woman for so long and done all of the things he did, produced a child, he would have never found himself incarcerated. Now, I'm not going to lie, what that mistress did, in my opinion, it was a checkmate, because some of the information I was able to uncover, I realized that he was using me as a pawn between him and his mistress. And he was making excuses about why he had not filed for a divorce when she was fully expecting him to do that. And he was speaking to her as if he was afraid of the divorce process, because he definitely knew he was the adulterer and the guilty party in the situation between he and I. And in my opinion, she checkmated him and said, if you're going to be afraid of a little civil judge, then let's see how you do in front of a criminal judge. And that's a checkmate if I ever seen one. And, but to me, this is just indication that when you dig a hole for somebody, you better be ready to fall in it, because neither one of them went unscathed in this situation, in the whole legal matter. Because at the end of the day, they are forever tied to one another through a child. So getting your child's father locked up on some petty stuff because you're pissed that he won't tap dance the way you want him to, when you actually came into the situation knowing what was going on, was very petty, in my opinion. But I believe my ex was in his reaping season, and this was part of his reaping. Was, okay, you're going to play around with my heart, you're going to lead me on and lead me to believe all of these things, and then you still won't divorce your wife? Okay, let's see how you handle this. Now, another thing that I realized, that things were getting to a dangerous point between my ex and his mistress, because he kept putting me into the middle, right? Without me even knowing, right? I'm totally in the blind. I didn't know that he was using me as a pawn between them when she was demanding certain things. So when I was reading certain things and seeing messages from her, and she was speaking about me in such a negative tone, almost like you would think that I had slept with her husband, the way she was speaking about me. When I was seeing those messages, I was like, I don't even know this lady. Why is she talking like that? But then I began to realize that she had laid under a man and absorbed all of his negativity about his wife for years. She had soaked up everything he said about me and was believing it 150%. And so her profile, her belief about me was nothing positive. And so, because her goal was to be his wife and I was in the way, right? It was just, the negative feelings just started compounding. Her negative feelings towards me started to compound. But when she realized that I would not engage with her, then I think she turned it back on my ex, right? Because, in my opinion, she started to realize that she had played the fool, that she had turned her life upside down for a married man, had a child with him, and now she can't get him to fulfill his promises. She can't get him to move according to what he had been apparently telling her. She couldn't get him to move according to what she had believed that he was going to do, and she was becoming more and more frustrated. And I believe she was having a bit of a mental break, because her life was, like I said, turned upside down with having a child by him. She already had a lot of responsibility. She had other things going on. And I think that having that child and realizing that this man is not going to fulfill what he told me he was going to do, it turned into a rage in her. And everybody was susceptible. I actually witnessed that while my ex was locked up, she really did not like his biological children. She was antagonizing them while he was locked up. And I was like surprised to see that she was so angry, that she was like almost trying to set them up. And like I said, I just wanted my ex out of jail because I did not want to have to deal with his foolishness, which by default, I ended up having to deal with it while he was locked up because apparently, ironically, he had nobody else that he could turn to, right? The very woman that he had been dogging out for years, talking negative about, is the very woman that had to help him in his time of need. And like I said, I did it with no malice intent because my thoughts was on my future and moving forward with a clean slate as much as I could. And I know that if I had gotten down and dirty and did anything to try to pay him back, it would probably just keep me in that negative loop or keep me in a loop with him longer than I needed to be. And I just wanted to move forward, especially once I got the evidence that I got. Especially once I realized everybody around him knew what was going on and they were just all keeping it a secret. And when I saw the mental state of his mistress, I definitely wanted to hurry up and get that away from me as quickly as possible because again, it reinforced why God instructed me the way that he did. Seeing how she was speaking about me, about him and our marriage, seeing that let me know that God was moving me strategically for my protection because unfortunately I married a man who was not a protector, that he had put me in harm's way without me really fully knowing. And that opening that book by having him locked up and the books being open, so to speak, and me being able to get access to certain information, like I said, it answered a lot of questions that I still had. It confirmed some things that I was thinking. And like I said, it just really helped me with filling in the gaps for me to really truly move on with my life. Like I said, the good thing was I was able to have that conversation with his children. We were able to clear the air. That was one of the best things that happened out of that. Just going through this process or going through that particular period of time dealing with that, I was completely over it because again, I was trying to embrace what my new life would look like, right? No longer living under the same roof with my then husband. I was trying to embrace that, and this was like another hiccup, but I also realized it was something that had to happen. It was a very much an eye opener in the process. I don't think that he like I said, I think he was humbled by this experience. I don't think it changed him as a man. I don't think he's fully ready to be an accountable man for his actions and his decisions. But one thing I know about life is when we're not accountable to ourselves, life figures out how to make us accountable. And I think that's what he's dealing with and what he's going through. He's going through his accountability for the decisions he made. He's going through the reaping for those bad decisions he was making time after time. And like I said, I wish him well, but this was one of those, I guess, another dark moment that I had to process because, like I said, dealing with him being locked up was just one part of it. But then the unfolding of the information that came out as a result of it was another big part to process. To realize, like, I remember this. I felt a level of fear once I got the information because it was like I really was sleeping with the enemy, right? Somebody that hated me to that level, that they would put me in harm's way in that manner. When I realized that, I remember he was speaking, like I said, like he wanted to move back into the home with me, and while he was locked up, and I didn't say anything while he was incarcerated, because again, I didn't want to kick him while he was down, but I knew there was no way this man could come back under the roof with me based on the information that I gathered. I was like, my life was already in danger, more in danger than I even knew. There was just a lot of little things that was happening, and I couldn't figure it out because I was in the blind about a lot of stuff. And this is the, like I said, the danger, the real danger of a cheating man is when they make you the target of their mistress because they're feeding the mistress lies, right? I could see if I had an encounter with her and then she hated me that much, right? Because maybe we got into it or we fussed at each other or we fought, or not that I would do that, but I could see if that was the case. But this lady's hatred towards me was as if those things had happened, and none of that had happened. And it was all based on the negativity my ex was spewing to her. And that was like I said, that was so eye opening for me. And it just solidified that this situation was definitely over between me and my ex. Even though he was trying to speak as if there was still life left, I knew based on the way he had been speaking about me behind my back that he had put the death nail into our marriage. And the fact that he had somewhat mentally unstable mistress also let me know there's no way I would be putting myself in harm's way if I tried to figure out a way to stay with this man, because who knows what else is out there. And one more thing that I started to figure out as I was going through, I guess, the evidence, it appeared that he was not just messing with his mistress. It appeared that he possibly had others or another or others, and he was basically using me as a shield to keep his mistress at bay, to keep his baby mama at bay. He was using me as a shield because I believe there are at least one other or others involved with him. And so, in order for him to keep moving the way he wanted to move, he was using me as a shield. I honestly believe that's why he never filed for divorce from me. It wasn't about him wanting to be with me, it was about him being able to use me as a shield when she would demand things from him, because he was not just involved with her. I believe he was involved with other women as well, or at least another woman. And that was why her anger was growing, because I think he was splitting time between her and maybe somebody else. And she started to sense something was off. But he kept throwing me into the mix of the conversation to make it seem as if it was me and it had nothing to do with me. This was him just being the serial cheater that he is. And I think it just took her longer than it should have to figure out what she was actually dealing with. And like I said, this was very dark, very mentally, emotionally draining, but it was something that I went through and I had to process through in my time of healing.